This is a question we've all asked ourselves at some point or another. What if humans could live on the moon? Now, I know what you're thinking. There's no air to breathe, there's no water, and it's super hot during the day and freezing cold at night. But don't worry, because in today's video, we'll be looking into how we can make life on the moon possible. So let's take a deep dive into this intriguing topic. The first thing that any potential moon base would need is a source of water. Now, you may have seen those pictures of astronauts on the moon with ice cubes in their helmets, but those are actually just cooling their visors down so they can see better. The temperature outside of their helmets was around 127 degrees Celsius, which is around 260 degrees Fahrenheit. So no, there isn't water on the surface of the moon that we can drink. However, there may be water on the moon. A study by the Lunar Exploration Program in 2009 found evidence that there were billions of tons of water locked inside of lunar rocks. And while mining these rocks to extract the water wouldn't be easy, it's not impossible either. NASA themselves are planning to set up a system where they can mine water from these rocks using lasers and microwaves. The other option is to simply bring water with us from Earth. While this would definitely be more convenient, it isn't exactly a realistic long-term solution. That's why we're going to need to learn how to use the resources available on the moon itself to survive. Speaking of resources, we need to talk about air. Humans need oxygen to survive, and the moon doesn't naturally produce any. The only way to solve this problem is to simply bring oxygen tanks with us when we go to the moon. While this would work in theory, it isn't really a feasible option for long stays on the moon. This is because the amount of oxygen we would need to bring with us would be too heavy to launch off of the surface of the Earth. Thankfully, there is a solution to this problem, and it comes from the same rocks that contain the water we can use as a resource. These rocks contain elements like aluminum and silicon that react with water to form hydrogen. The hydrogen can then be separated and used as rocket fuel, meaning that we wouldn't need to transport oxygen from Earth to the moon after all. But wait, there's more. It turns out that the process of splitting the water will also produce oxygen as a byproduct. Not only does this mean that we have oxygen to breathe, but we also have a source of hydrogen fuel that we can use for transportation. In fact, this opens up an entire new method of getting around on the moon. You see, lunar rovers aren't exactly built for speed. They're more built for carrying scientific equipment and not people. Also, they're pretty expensive, costing around $2 million per trip. With the ability to produce our own fuel on the moon, we could build our own vehicles and explore further than we ever have before. We could even use the hydrogen to create helium, which would allow us to float around the moon, similar to how airships float through the skies of our world. But even with all of these measures in place, we still haven't solved the biggest problem of living on the moon: radiation. The moon has no atmosphere to speak of, which means that it offers very little protection from harmful cosmic rays and solar winds. Astronauts on the moon are exposed to around 200 to 300 times the amount of radiation that we get here on Earth. Exposure to this much radiation can lead to acute radiation sickness, which includes symptoms like nausea, vomiting, fatigue, hair loss, and a general feeling of malaise. But the real danger comes in the long term. Radiation exposure can lead to an increased risk of cancer and damage to the central nervous system. Astronaut Scott Kelly spent a year on the International Space Station and came back with a mutated gene, one that scientists say could have been passed down to his future children. It's unclear what effect this will have on him and his family, but it's likely that living on the moon would pose too high a risk. Thankfully, scientists have already developed a way to protect astronauts from this deadly radiation, and it's actually quite simple. All we need to do is dig. By building our bases underground, we can shield ourselves from the worst of the cosmic radiation. In fact, the surface of the moon is bombarded by meteors all the time, so we should probably build underground anyway. Not only will we be safe from radiation, but from micrometeorites as well. NASA themselves are planning for their first Artemis base to be established within lava tubes. These are natural tunnels created when magma flows under the surface of the moon and then evaporates, leaving behind hollow tubes. We don't know exactly how common these tubes are on the moon, but NASA is hopeful that they can find one near the surface so that they don't have to expend precious resources digging a tunnel themselves. Either way, radiation will be a problem we can overcome once we start living on the moon. Now that we've covered everything from water to fuel to radiation, let's talk about how we can power a human settlement on the moon. After all, we're going to need a lot of electricity to power the computers and other systems necessary for survival. Luckily, there's plenty of energy on the moon for us to harvest. Nuclear power is a viable option since we won't have to worry about greenhouse gases or pollution. However, nuclear power plants are somewhat dangerous to operate, and we also have to consider the waste that will eventually be left behind. Solar power is probably the safest and cleanest option for powering our moon base. In fact, the lunar surface receives about twice as much sunlight as the Earth, making it a perfect candidate for a large-scale solar farm. The downside, of course, is that at night we'll have to rely on battery storage systems to keep our base running. But with careful planning, we should be able to avoid any major issues. Now that we've covered the basics of living on the moon, let's look at what life might actually be like in a lunar colony. One of the most interesting aspects of living on the moon is the low-gravity environment. On the moon, gravity is around 1/6 of what it is on Earth. This means that we'd be able to lift much heavier objects and move around much more easily. However, it also means that our bodies would start to weaken over time since we wouldn't have to exert ourselves to move around. This could lead to a whole host of other health problems down the line. But the good news is that NASA already has a plan for this as well. By carefully monitoring the amount of exercise we get, we can keep our bodies strong and healthy, even in low-gravity environments. Another aspect of life on the moon is the stunning view. From the surface of the moon, we'd be able to see the Earth rise and set every 27 days, reminding us of the beauty of our home planet. We'd also be able to witness amazing views of the stars and planets in our solar system. If all goes according to plan, the first Artemis base will be operational in 2030. This will be followed by several more bases over the next decade or so, each with their own unique purpose. Some will be focused on scientific research, while others will focus on mining and extracting resources. Eventually, there will be enough bases on the moon to support a small population of humans. While living on the moon will present many challenges, it's also an opportunity for us to learn more about the universe around us. Who knows what discoveries we'll make or what technologies we'll develop once we start living on the moon. One thing is for sure, though, living on the moon will be an amazing experience. Just imagine the stories you'll be able to tell when you get back to Earth. So, what do you think? Would you ever want to live on the moon? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed learning all about life on the moon with me. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Until next time, stay curious and keep asking questions. I'll see you then.